They tied the beads on my wrist before I even said yes. And 3 nights later, the man they wanted me to marry was found with a knife in his back. And everyone in the village pointed at me. If you love stories that grab your chest and refuse to let go, stay till the end, because this one has more twists than you can guess. And if you are new here, tap that subscribe button now, because you don't want to miss what's coming. My name is Adaeze. I was 19 years old, the daughter of a poor palm wine tapper, when Chief Obidike of Umuoke village chose me to marry his eldest son, Kelechi. You have to understand what that meant in a village like ours. Chief Obidike was not just rich, he was the law. His word was heavier than the elders' council. His compound had 7 buildings, 3 wives, and a barn full of yams that could feed the whole village through 2 harvest seasons. And me? My family owned 1 goat and a leaking roof. So when the chief's messengers came to my father's hut with kola nut and palm wine, asking for my hand on behalf of his son, my father wept, not from sadness, from relief. Adaeze, he told me that night, his voice shaking. God has answered prayers I didn't even know how to pray. I smiled at him. I nodded. What else could I do? A girl like me did not refuse a chief. But here is what nobody in my family knew. What nobody in the village knew. 3 moons before the chief's messengers ever came to our hut, I had already given my heart away. And the man I loved was not Kelechi, the chief's golden son. The man I loved was Chidozie, the son of the chief's greatest enemy, the man the whole village had been taught to hate before they even learned to hate mosquitoes and bad harvests. Let me take you back because you need to understand how deep this rot went and how far back the poison stretched before I tell you what happened on the night Kelechi died. 10 years before I was born, there was a dispute over land between 2 brothers, Chief Obidike's father and a man named Eze Anikwe. The land in question sat between 2 farms, rich with red soil, the kind that made yams grow fat and sweet. Both men claimed it. The elders were called, oaths were sworn, and in the end, the land was given to Obidike's father because he had more allies on the council, more gifts to offer, more mouths singing his praise. Eze Anikwe never accepted this. He said it was theft dressed up as justice. He cursed the compound of his rival before the whole village, standing in the market square with his fist raised to the sky, promising that the soil that betrayed him would one day drink the blood of the family that stole it. People laughed at him then. Old men mutter curses all the time. But laughter turns to fear fast in villages like ours, especially when things start going wrong. The chief's first wife lost 3 children in childbirth. A strange sickness swept through the Obidike's goats one dry season, killing them one by one until the pen stood empty. And when Eze Anikwe died, of nothing more mysterious than old age and a weak heart, his son Chidozie inherited not just his father's small farm, but his father's fire, his father's grievance, his father's war. By the time Chidozie and I were both grown, the 2 families had not spoken a single peaceful word to each other in over 20 decades. Children were warned not to play near the Anikwe compound. Elders whispered that anyone who married into that family would bring the curse into their own bloodline. And Chief Obidike, now the most powerful man in Umuoke, made no secret that he wanted the Anikwe family erased from every position of respect in the village, their names spoken only in warning, the way you'd warn a child about a snake in tall grass. So you understand now, don't you? You understand why nobody could ever know that I met Chidozie at the stream behind the cassava farms on an ordinary afternoon when I had gone to fetch water and he had gone to check on a trap he'd set for bush rats. You understand why when our eyes met that first day, I felt something crack open inside my chest that I didn't have a name for yet. Something dangerous, something that could get us both killed if the wrong person saw. He was quiet, Chidozie, not shy. Quiet the way still water is, hiding depths you can't measure by looking at the surface. He had scars on his knuckles from farm work and a way of tilting his head when he listened to you that made you feel like the only person in the world. He didn't speak much about his father's feud at first. In fact, the first time we spoke properly, we didn't discuss our families at all. We argued, actually argued, about whether the rains would come early that year. He said yes, I said no. We were both wrong, as it turned out. But that argument stretched into an hour, and that hour stretched into weeks of secret meetings by the stream, in the shadow of the old Iroko tree, in the hour just before dusk, when the village women had already gone home and the men were still out on the farms. I want you to imagine the fear that comes with loving someone your entire world had taught you to see as an enemy. Every meeting felt like walking on a blade. Every laugh we shared by that stream was stolen. And yet, I could not stop. I did not want to stop. For the first time in my life, someone looked at me like I was not just a poor palm wine tapper's daughter, destined for whatever fate the wealthy chose for me. Chidozie looked at me like my thoughts mattered, like my dreams mattered. And in a village where girls were married off like yams sold at market, that feeling was more intoxicating than any palm wine. But love does not pause the world around it. While I was falling deeper for a man my family would call our enemy, Chief Obidike was watching me from a distance, deciding my fate without ever asking my opinion. You see, Kelechi, the chief's eldest son, had seen me at the stream one evening, a different evening, thank God, not one where Chidozie was with me, and he had gone home and told his father that he wanted me as his wife. Kelechi was not cruel. I want to be fair to him, because what happened to him still haunts me, even now, telling you this story. Kelechi was proud, yes, spoiled certainly. What son of a powerful chief isn't? But he was not cruel. He simply believed, the way men of his position often believe, that whatever he wanted, he deserved to have. And what he wanted that season was me. So when the chief's messengers came to our hut with kola nut and palm wine, asking for my hand on behalf of his son, my father wept. Not from sadness, from relief. I told him no. I told him the truth, pressed against my teeth like a living thing desperate to escape. But what could saying no do for me? A poor girl does not refuse a chief's son. My family would be ruined, my father would be humiliated before the whole village. There was no path where I said no and my life continued as it was. Chidozie took my hands that night, and this is the part I still remember most clearly, more than the wedding beads, more than anything Kelechi ever said to me. He told me, then we will find another way. But Adaeze, promise me you will not stop loving me even while you wear another man's beads. I promised. God forgive me, I promised, and I meant it with everything in me. Now, here is where this story takes its first real turn, and I need you to pay close attention because nothing that happened next was as simple as it looked from the outside. The wedding was set for the new moon 6 weeks away. In those 6 weeks, I continued to meet Chidozie in secret, though we grew more careful, more desperate, more afraid. But something else was happening that I did not know about at the time, something I only pieced together much later after the blood had already been spilled. Kelechi, it turned out, was not simply a proud young man excited about his upcoming marriage. Kelechi had secrets of his own, secrets that had nothing to do with me at all. There was a woman named Ijeoma, a widow from the next village, older than Kelechi by several years, who had been his lover in secret for over a year before I ever entered the picture. Ijeoma had a son, a boy of 6, who Kelechi had never publicly acknowledged, but who everyone in her village knew to be his. When Kelechi's father arranged his marriage to me, Ijeoma did not take the news quietly. she sent word to Kelechi that if he married a chief's chosen bride and abandoned her and her son to shame, she would go to Chief Obidike herself and expose everything: the affair, the child, the years of lies Kelechi had told his own father about where he disappeared to on market days. You see, this whole time, I believed I was the only one carrying a dangerous secret in that village. I believed Chidozie and I were the only forbidden lovers hiding in plain sight. But Kelechi had been living his own double life for over a year, and it was about to collide with mine in a way none of us could have predicted. Before I continue, let me just say, if this story already has your heart racing, wait until you hear what happens on the wedding eve. But don't scroll away. Hit that subscribe button now, because the next part of this story is where everything unravels and you will not see the truth coming. 3 days before the wedding, Ijeoma arrived in Umuoke village. She did not come quietly. She came to the chief's compound in broad daylight, her son's hand in hers, and demanded an audience with Chief Obidike himself. I was not there to witness it. I heard the story afterwards, in pieces, the way village gossip always travels, growing and shifting with every mouth it passes through. But what I understood was this: Ijeoma stood before the chief and told him that his son had fathered a child with her, that he had promised to marry her once his father's business allowed it, and that he could not now marry another woman while abandoning her and their son to shame. Chief Obidike, a man who valued his family's reputation above almost everything else, was furious, but not at Kelechi in the way you might expect. He was furious that this scandal threatened to unravel his marriage that would strengthen his standing in the village, that would tie his family to mine in a way that made him look generous and benevolent, lifting a poor family up through marriage. He did not care about Ijeoma's broken heart. He cared about optics, about power, about the story the village would tell about the great Chief Obidike. He ordered Kelechi to deny everything, to send Ijeoma away with a bribe of yams and cloth, and to proceed with the wedding as planned, as though nothing had happened. Kelechi, to his credit, and I say this even though what came later broke my heart in ways I still struggle to explain, Kelechi refused. He told his father he would not deny his own son. He told his father that whatever happened, he intended to provide for Ijeoma and the boy, marriage or no marriage. This was, perhaps, the only truly honorable thing Kelechi did in this entire story, and it cost him more than he ever imagined. Because Chief Obidike, humiliated and enraged that his son would defy him over a widow and his bastard, as he cruelly called them, decided to handle the matter himself, quietly, without his son's knowledge. He sent men to warn Ijeoma to leave the village and never return, threatening her with consequences if she spoke another word about the affair to anyone. Ijeoma left, but she did not leave quietly in her heart. She left burning with a fury that would soon connect to a fire already smoldering somewhere else in that village, a fire I was trying desperately to contain within myself. Now, here is where the threads of this story begin to weave together in ways that surprised even me, and I lived through every moment of it. On the night before my wedding, I went to the stream one final time to see Chidozie, to say goodbye, or perhaps to convince myself I could survive a lifetime married to a man I did not love while carrying a secret love inside me like a stone in my chest. But what I did not expect was to find Chidozie already there, pacing, agitated in a way I had never seen him before. He told me something had happened. His cousin, a young man named Obina, who worked occasionally in the chief's compound cutting wood, had overheard a conversation between Chief Obidike and one of his most trusted men, a conversation about Ijeoma, about Kelechi's defiance, and about a plan the chief was considering to remove the problem of Kelechi's disobedience entirely by having him married off quickly and quietly, sent away to manage a distant farm the family owned, far from the village, far from Ijeoma, far from any further embarrassment. But that was not the part that shook Chidozie. The part that shook him was this. Obina also overheard the chief mention my name, Adaeze, and the Anikwe family in the same breath, in a tone that suggested suspicion. Someone, it seemed, had seen me near the Anikwe farm more than once in recent weeks. Someone had begun to whisper. Chidozie gripped my hands that night and told me we needed to be far more careful, that people were watching, that if the chief discovered our relationship before the wedding, the consequences would fall not just on us, but on our families, his mother, my father, everyone we loved. We agreed with heavy hearts that we would not meet again until after the wedding, until I found some way, some path to survive my marriage while keeping our love alive in secret, however painful that arrangement would be. I walked home from the stream that night feeling as though I were walking toward my own execution. The wedding day itself passed in a blur of drumming, dancing, and forced smiles I do not fully remember even now. I wore the beads, I drank the wine, I accepted my new name as Kelechi's wife before the elders and the ancestors. And that night, in the quiet of the room prepared for us, Kelechi surprised me by not touching me at all. He sat across from me, this proud young man I barely knew, and he said something I will never forget. Adaeze, I know you did not choose this marriage. I did not fully choose it either. I have a son in another village that I love more than my own name, and a woman I have wronged by marrying you instead of standing beside her before the whole world. I will be a husband to you in name, and I will treat you with respect, but I will not pretend to a love that does not exist between us. Perhaps in time, we can build something honest, even if it is not the love of songs and poems. I sat there stunned, because in that single moment, Kelechi had unknowingly given me a strange kind of relief and also a terrible new fear. If he was honest with me about Ijeoma, would he expect the same honesty from me? Was this some kind of test? Or was he in his own broken way, extending an olive branch, hoping I would extend one back? I did not tell him about Chidozie that night. I could not. The stakes were simply too high. But something shifted between Kelechi and I after that conversation. A strange, careful respect began to grow. The kind that exists between two people who recognize they are both trapped by the same forces, both sacrificed on the altar of family pride and village politics. Now pause with me here for a moment, because this is where the suspense truly tightens, and if you've made it this far, you already know something is about to break. Make sure you're subscribed, because what happens next changed everything, and I promise you, you have not guessed the full truth yet. 3 weeks into my marriage, Kelechi began making quiet arrangements to send money and provisions to Ijeoma and her son in secret, defying his father's orders. He asked for my help concealing these arrangements from his father's watchful eyes. And strangely, a fragile alliance grew between us, not romantic, but something like the loyalty of two conspirators trapped in the same cage. I helped him. In exchange, he gave me more freedom than a typical bride might expect, allowing me trips to the market, to the stream, to visit my family, without demanding I explain every moment of my time. This freedom is what allowed Chidozie and I to begin meeting again, carefully, sparingly, but enough to keep the fire between us alive, enough to keep me sane in a marriage built on convenient arrangements and buried secrets. But Ijeoma, back in her village, grew impatient and afraid. The provisions Kelechi sent were generous, but they were not what she truly wanted. She wanted her son acknowledged. She wanted her name cleared of shame. And when weeks passed with no sign that Kelechi intended to publicly claim his son, her fear turned to something sharper. She began to suspect that Kelechi was simply buying her silence while enjoying a comfortable marriage to a young bride, a suspicion that was not entirely fair, but not entirely wrong either, given how complicated the truth of Kelechi's feelings had become. Ijeoma made a decision that would set the final tragedy in motion. She traveled back to Moke in secret, not to see Chief Obidike this time, but to confront Kelechi directly late one night near the edge of the cassava farms, the very same farms near the stream where Chidozie and I had built our secret world. What happened next, I did not witness directly. I have had to piece it together from fragments, from what Chidozie told me, from what was eventually confessed, from what the elders uncovered in the difficult days that followed. But here is the truth, as close as I can offer it to you. That night, Kelechi went to meet Ijeoma near the farms, hoping to calm her fears, to promise her again that he intended to do right by his son eventually, once he found a way to manage his father's expectations. Their conversation grew heated. Ijeoma, desperate and wounded, accused him of cowardice, of choosing his father's approval over his own son's future. Voices rose, and unknown to either of them, someone else was near those farms that night too. Someone's presence would tangle the threads of this story into something none of us could have predicted. Chidozie had come to meet me at our usual spot by the stream that night. Only I had been unable to slip away undetected, held back by one of Kelechi's mother's unexpected visits to check on me. So Chidozie waited alone in the darkness near the farms, growing increasingly anxious as the hour passed, with no sign of me. It was during this wait that Chidozie overheard the argument between Kelechi and Ijeoma, voices carrying across the quiet night air. He recognized Kelechi's voice immediately, and in a moment of impulsive, dangerous curiosity, the kind of decision that changes the entire shape of a life, Chidozie crept closer to listen, hidden in the shadows of the cassava stalks. What he heard chilled him. Kelechi, in his frustration, said something Ijeoma took as a threat, a warning that if she continued causing trouble for him, he had ways of making problems disappear, a phrase he likely meant as an empty boast born of anger and helplessness, but which Ijeoma, in her fear and desperation, interpreted as something far more sinister. She fled the farms in tears that night, convinced that her life and her son's life were now in danger. Chidozie, still hidden, watched Kelechi standing alone in the moonlight after Ijeoma had gone, his shoulders slumped, his face, as Chidozie described it to me later, a mixture of guilt and exhaustion that did not match the image of a cold, threatening man at all. But Chidozie did not step forward. He simply melted back into the darkness and made his way home, his mind swirling with dangerous new knowledge about the man who now called me his wife. 2 nights later, Kelechi was found dead behind the chief's compound, a knife wound in his back, his body discovered by one of the servants at dawn. The village exploded into chaos, and almost immediately, almost before the body had even grown cold, suspicion turned toward me. Why me, you might ask? Because a young house girl, one who cleaned the chief's outer courtyard, claimed she had seen me slipping away from the compound late that same night, walking in the direction of the farms, the same direction where Kelechi's body was later found. She had misunderstood what she saw. I had indeed gone out that night, but only to leave a message for Chidozie through an old woman who sometimes carried word between us, warning him that I could not meet him for several more days because Kelechi's mother had grown suspicious of my frequent absences. I had nothing to do with Kelechi's death, but the timing, the direction, the secrecy of my movements, all of it painted a picture that looked exactly like guilt. Chief Obidike, grieving and enraged, demanded I be brought before the elders' council to answer for what the house girl had witnessed. And here is where the suspense of this story reaches its most dangerous point. Because I stood before that council with 2 unbearable truths pressing against my chest. The truth that I had not killed Kelechi, and the truth that revealing where I had actually gone that night and why would expose my love for Chidozie, a secret that could destroy not just me, but him and both our families, in a village already primed to see their Nikwe name as synonymous with curses and violence. If you think you know how this ends, I promise you, you don't. Stay with me, because the truth that finally came out shocked the entire village, myself included. Standing before the elders, I chose honesty, though not the full truth.
I admitted I had left the compound that night, but I claimed I had gone simply to walk and clear my mind, too ashamed and afraid to reveal the real reason. The elders were unconvinced. Whispers grew louder. Some even suggested that perhaps I had discovered Kelechi's affair with Ijoma and killed him in a jealous rage, or perhaps I had conspired with my own family to eliminate him after securing the social benefits, a theory as cruel as it was baseless. It was Chidozie who finally stepped forward on the third day of the council's deliberations and did something that terrified me more than anything else in this entire story. He revealed everything. Our meetings, our love, what he had overheard that night near the farms between Kelechi and Ijoma. He knew that by speaking, he was exposing us both to unimaginable danger and shame, potentially reigniting the old family war in the worst possible way. But he could not stand by and let me be falsely accused of murder while the true chain of events remained hidden. His testimony stunned the entire village into silence. Chief Obidike's face, according to those who witnessed it, went through fury, humiliation, and finally, something unexpected, a kind of exhausted grief that seemed to age him 10 years in a single moment. Because Chidozie's testimony led the elders to send men back to question Ijoma in her own village, and what they discovered there was the final devastating twist in this story. Ijoma had not killed Kelechi either, but in her fear after that final confrontation, believing Kelechi intended to silence her permanently, she had confided in her older brother, a hot-tempered man who had long resented Kelechi for dishonoring her sister. Believing he was protecting Ijoma and her son from a dangerous man, Ijoma's older brother traveled to Umuoke that same night, found Kelechi alone near the farms, and confronted him in a rage that ended in violence neither of them had planned when the sun had risen that morning. When the truth finally came to light, confirmed by the brother's own trembling confession before the elders, unable to carry the weight of his guilt any longer, the entire village had to reckon with how easily they had been ready to condemn me, a poor girl with no power, based on nothing but assumption and old prejudice, while the real story had been tangled in secrets belonging to people no one had even suspected. Chief Obidike, humbled in a way I never thought possible for a man of his pride, publicly acknowledged Kelechi's son with Ijoma before the whole village, honoring his late son's wish that cost him so dearly. And in a moment that still brings tears to my eyes when I remember it, he turned to Chidozie and me, standing together before the council for the first time in the open, and he said words that ended a war that had poisoned two families for over 20 decades. Enough blood has been spilled, chasing old ghosts. Let this village bury its curses along with its dead. Chidozie and I were finally allowed to marry, not in secret, not in shame, but before the entire village, the same people who once whispered our family's names like curses, now witnessing the healing of a wound none of us had known how to close. But I want to leave you with this, because it is the truest thing I learned through everything I survived. Love that is forced to hide in darkness will always eventually seek the light, no matter how dangerous the path, no matter how many secrets must break apart to let it breathe. My story could have ended in tragedy, in false accusation, in a war reignited by grief and misunderstanding. Instead, it became the very thing that finally silenced an old, bitter feud between two families who had forgotten how to see each other as anything but enemies. If this story moved you, if you felt your heart racing through every twist alongside mine, do not scroll away without subscribing, because there are more stories like this waiting for you. Stories of love, betrayal, and truths that refuse to stay buried forever. Until next time, walk gently, love bravely, and never let old wars decide who your heart is allowed to choose.